The glass shimmered in the soft glow of the candles, catching the reflection of my own smile. Polite, practiced, unaware. The room buzzed with laughter, the faint scent of vanilla cake in the air, the ocean breeze drifting through the open doors. And then, in the smallest flicker of a moment, I saw her hand hover over my drink. My daughter-in-law. Her eyes darted, her breath quickened, and something inside me whispered to switch glasses. If you've ever trusted someone who turned out to be dangerous, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from, because what happened next still chills me. The laughter faded, the world slowed, and when she fell instead of me, I realized that night wasn't just my birthday. It was the night my life began to unravel. Let me show you how it all began. It happened on a night that was supposed to be full of laughter. My birthday. The kind of evening where the clinking of glasses and the soft hum of music blend into something warm and familiar. I remember the glow of the candles, the smiles, the way everyone leaned in when I raised my glass. And then I saw it, barely a flicker, her hand hovering over my drink. My daughter-in-law, the woman I trusted. Something small slipped from her fingers, dissolving into the liquid like it belonged there. For a second, I told myself I'd imagined it, that my mind was playing tricks on me. But a chill crept up my spine, one I couldn't ignore. I smiled, pretending everything was fine, and when no one was watching, I switched our glasses. It was a reflex, quiet, almost mechanical. I didn't even know why I did it. Minutes later, she took a sip. The room filled with laughter, and then it stopped. The glass fell from her hand. Her body trembled. People screamed. I froze, my heart slamming against my ribs, watching as chaos swallowed the celebration. The smell of perfume mixed with the bitter edge of spilled wine. My son called her name. Someone shouted for an ambulance. I just stood there, holding the glass that should have been mine. As the sirens wailed in the distance, I felt a wave of nausea, not from fear, but from something deeper. The realization that this wasn't a mistake. She had meant for me to drink it. That night didn't just ruin a birthday. It shattered everything I believed about my family, my safety, my own judgment. And if you think this story sounds unbelievable, you're not alone. Let me take you back to the life I thought I had before it all fell apart. After that night, my mind kept replaying the chaos. So maybe that's why I keep going back to the time before, when everything seemed safe. Before suspicion found its way into my home, my life in Malibu felt like a gentle exhale after years of holding my breath. I'd survived a painful divorce and spent 2 years learning how to be alone again. Mornings were quiet. I'd walk the beach barefoot, coffee in hand, watching the waves roll in and out like the rhythm of forgiveness itself. I'd built something steady. My little home overlooked the ocean, simple but full of light. The scent of salt air mixed with the lavender I planted by the porch. For the first time in years, I believed I'd found peace. I filled my days with small joys, baking, volunteering at the local animal shelter, catching up with neighbors who had long since become friends. It was ordinary in the best possible way. My son Matthew visited often, and every time he did, the house felt alive again. He'd grown into a kind, responsible man, the kind of person any mother would be proud of. When he introduced me to Emily, his new wife. I remember thinking she was perfect for him, graceful, intelligent, charming in a way that made everyone around her feel seen. She brought energy into every room she entered. Still, there were moments that didn't sit right. Fleeting things I brushed off because I wanted so badly to believe in family harmony. A strange glance when Matthew wasn't looking. A small correction when I told a story, like she needed to control the version of me that others saw. Sometimes, I caught her watching me, not with affection, but with calculation. Yet I told myself I was being paranoid. After all, hadn't I finally earned my peace? Looking back, I see how easily comfort can turn into blindness. I thought life had finally given me rest, that I could stop fighting. But peace, built on illusions, never lasts. And I was about to learn just how dangerous pretending everything is fine can be. At first, I believed Matthew's marriage to Emily was a second chance for our family. After the pain of the past, I thought maybe love could rebuild what life had fractured. The way they looked together, their hands intertwined, their smiles mirroring one another. It seemed like stability, and I wanted to believe in that more than anything. Our family dinners became small rituals of renewal. The clatter of plates, the soft background music, the glow of candlelight. It all looked perfect from the outside. Emily would glide around the table, complimenting the meal, laughing in the right places, always poised. She never raised her voice, never let an emotion slip out of place. It should have comforted me. Instead, it unsettled me. There were moments when her eyes lingered too long. Her compliments carried a sharp edge hidden beneath the sweetness. Once, she touched my shoulder while telling a story. Her grip just a little too firm, her smile just a little too wide. I brushed it off as imagination. Maybe I wanted to. Matthew adored her completely. He looked at her the way a man does when he believes he's found his peace. I didn't want to be the one to disturb that. Every mother knows the cost of coming between her son and his happiness. So I silenced my instincts and told myself love could explain everything. The perfect answers, the occasional lies that sounded too practiced, the way she'd steer conversations without seeming to. Looking back, I realize how fragile the illusion was. I saw the cracks but chose to polish the surface instead. I told myself family meant forgiveness, that suspicion had no place in love, but love without truth is a mask. And behind Emily's, something dark was already watching, waiting. I should have listened sooner. The afternoon sun poured through the windows, casting gold over the kitchen counter. The scent of vanilla frosting and fresh flowers filled the air. It was my birthday, and for the first time in years, I felt a quiet happiness settle over me. Laughter drifted through the living room. Matthew was setting up music. Emily was arranging the cake, and I told myself this was what peace was supposed to feel like. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. Emily kept glancing at the clock. Her movements a little too careful. Her laughter a little too practiced. She floated around the kitchen with that same polite grace, asking if I liked the wine she'd brought, insisting on pouring it herself. I remember watching her hands tremble slightly as she filled 2 glasses, mine and hers. Something in me hesitated, a feeling I couldn't explain, like a whisper brushing the back of my mind. When she turned away, I noticed her lean over my glass. It was small, almost invisible, but enough to make my breath catch. I felt a cold wave crawl through my chest. I smiled, pretending nothing was wrong, pretending I hadn't seen what I saw. I told myself I was overreacting, but when she handed me the glass, that whisper in my mind grew louder. I switched them, quietly, naturally, without a word. A simple, instinctive motion that didn't even feel real at the time. She didn't notice. Minutes later, Matthew raised his glass to make a toast. Everyone laughed, the music played, and for one suspended moment, it all seemed fine. Then Emily's body went rigid. The glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. Her face drained of color, and the sound of laughter turned into screams. I froze. My heart pounded so loud I could hear it over everything else. I stared at the glass still in my hand, the one that should have been hers, the one she meant for me. As she collapsed, the truth crashed over me like a wave I couldn't outrun. She hadn't made a mistake. I had just watched someone try to end my life, and I didn't yet know why. Everything after the glass shattered became a blur of sound and motion. Someone screamed. Matthew rushed to Emily's side. Chairs scraped. People shouted for help, the music still playing in the background like a cruel joke. I remember the color draining from her face, her body trembling, her eyes unfocused. I just stood there frozen, my hand still wrapped around the stem of my glass. The paramedics arrived fast, but time felt distorted. Every second stretched thin and unreal. The flashing red lights painted the walls, the sirens echoing in my ears long after they stopped. They carried her out on a stretcher, Matthew following close behind, his voice breaking with panic. I wanted to comfort him, but I couldn't move. My mind kept circling the same thought, quiet but relentless that should have been me. I replayed the moment over and over, the pour, the hesitation, the switch. I hadn't planned it. It wasn't logic. It was instinct. Something deep inside me had whispered to act, and I did. And that small, almost invisible decision had drawn the line between my life and my death. For hours after, I sat alone at the kitchen table. The scent of spilled wine and frosting still hung in the air. I stared at the two glasses, one untouched, one shattered, and tried to make sense of what had just happened. The police asked questions, but I could barely speak. Words felt too fragile to hold the truth forming inside me. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't bad luck or coincidence. Someone had wanted me gone, and Emily, perfect. Smiling Emily had been the one to deliver it. The shock hadn't even settled before fear began to take its place. My heart refused to accept it, but my instincts already knew. I was alive because something inside me refused to trust her. And now, I needed to know why. The hospital lights were too bright, the walls too white. I remember waking up to the steady rhythm of machines and the metallic taste in my mouth. My hands trembled as I tried to sit up, but the room tilted before I could find balance. The nurse told me I'd fainted from shock. They said I was lucky. I didn't feel lucky. I felt hollow. Everything after the party blurred together. Sirens, questions, the sound of Matthew's voice breaking as he begged for answers no one could give. Emily was in critical condition. I should have felt pity, but all I could feel was confusion. The police came the next day, their faces calm but searching. They wanted details, the sequence of events, Who poured what? When I drank. Their questions weren't casual. I could tell they already suspected something darker. When they told me the test results confirmed the presence of poison, I felt the air leave my lungs. Poison. The word didn't fit in the same sentence as family, as home. But there it was, sitting between us like a cold truth. For days, I tried to convince myself it was an accident, some twisted mistake. Yet memories began to line up in my mind, each one sharper than before. The trembling hands, the forced smile, the way Emily had insisted on serving the drinks. Every detail I had brushed aside now burned with clarity. I replayed it all while lying awake at night, the beeping monitor counting each second of disbelief. I thought about trust, about how blind love can make you. I thought about how close I had come to dying in my own home. And I thought about the moment I switched the glasses, the one choice that had saved me. Grief came next, not just for what almost happened, but for the family I realized I never truly knew. Fear followed, but beneath it, something stronger began to grow. The truth was out there, and I couldn't rest until I found it. Whoever did this had expected me to stay silent. They didn't know me at all. The days after the hospital felt endless, like I was living in the echo of something that refused to fade. The police had done their questioning, but their investigation moved too slowly. Every hour that passed without answers made the silence heavier. I couldn't wait for them to find the truth. I needed to find it myself. At first, I didn't know where to start. Emily's life before Matthew had always been a mystery I never thought to question. She spoke about her past in fragments, just enough to sound believable. But now, every detail felt suspicious. I began with the simple things, her social media, old photos, anything that didn't fit. The deeper I dug, the stranger it became. Names didn't match. Dates didn't line up. Her college degree appeared in 2 different states under 2 different last names. I found a marriage license from nearly 10 years ago to a man in Nevada. Then another, 3 years later, in Texas. Both men were dead within a year of the wedding, one from a car crash, the other, an overdose. The coincidences stacked up like stones, each one heavier than the last. And beneath the fear, something colder began to settle. Certainty. Emily wasn't who she said she was. She had built an entire life out of lies. When I traced one of her old addresses, I froze. It was a town my ex-husband had once mentioned from his business trips years ago. The name was too specific to ignore. I felt my stomach twist. I started connecting timelines, and suddenly, things that never made sense before began falling into place. His unexplained absences, his sudden withdrawal before our divorce. The realization hit like a punch to the chest. Emily hadn't just entered my son's life by chance. She had known exactly who we were, and now, after everything, I couldn't tell if she had been targeting me all along, or if someone else had been behind her from the start. The fear that had once kept me quiet turned into resolve. I was done being a victim. Whoever had set this in motion was still out there, and I was going to find them. It was late afternoon when the detectives came back. Their faces told me everything before their words did. The investigation had taken a turn, one I never could have imagined. They said Emily hadn't acted alone. She was part of something bigger, something calculated. And at the center of it was a name I thought I'd buried years ago. My ex-husband. For a moment, the world went silent. The air in the room thinned until I could barely breathe. I heard his voice in my head, smooth and charming like it always had been. I remembered the way he used to smile when he lied. Every memory I'd forced into the past came flooding back, reeking of manipulation I'd refused to see. The detectives laid out the evidence: bank transfers, false accounts, a pattern of insurance payouts linked to women just like me. There were files, aliases, even fake companies tracing back to him. And Emily. She wasn't just Matthew's wife. She had been recruited, groomed, used. The truth hit harder than any physical blow. The man I once built a life with had turned human connection into a business of death. And I was supposed to be the next prophet. Grief came first, not for him, but for the years I'd wasted believing I'd escaped him. Then came guilt, for not recognizing the danger, for letting my son marry into it. But beneath the grief and guilt, something else began to stir. Clarity. I understood now that surviving wasn't luck. It was purpose. Every lie, every scar, every sleepless night had led me here, to this moment of truth. He thought he'd erased me from his story. He was wrong. As I sat there, listening to the officers outline what they'd uncovered, I stopped shaking. My pulse slowed. The fear that had gripped me for weeks dissolved into something sharper, colder, steadier. If he thought he could manipulate my life from the shadows again, he had underestimated me. I wouldn't just survive this, I would bring it into the light. He had built his empire on silence. I was going to destroy it with truth. The plan came together quietly, like stitching a wound that refused to heal. The detectives had all they needed: evidence, surveillance, confessions from smaller players, but not the moment that would close the case. That part would be mine. I agreed to lure them out, to play the part of the forgiving ex-wife, the woman desperate to move past tragedy. It was dangerous, but I wanted to look them in the eyes. I needed to. The night before the meeting, I barely slept. Every sound in the house felt amplified: the creak of the floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, the whisper of my own pulse. Fear sat beside me like an old companion, but beneath it was something steadier: resolve. I wasn't the same woman they had tried to destroy. The setup was simple: a quiet restaurant, late afternoon, a public space where they'd feel safe. The FBI would blend in as staff and patrons, their eyes always on me. I arrived first, dressed in calm. My hands shook under the table, but my smile held. When Emily walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. The confidence was gone, replaced by a brittle edge. My ex-husband followed minutes later, still wearing that same easy arrogance that once fooled me into love. He spoke softly, leaning forward, his tone casual. Emily stayed silent, her eyes darting toward the exits. I nodded along, pretending to accept his apology, pretending I still believed in peace. Every second felt stretched thin, every breath a risk. I could feel the agents moving closer, waiting for the signal. Then it happened. His hand brushed mine. The coded phrase slipped from my lips, and the world erupted in motion. The officers surrounded us in a blur of sound: commands, footsteps, cuffs snapping shut. Emily froze, tears streaking her face. My ex-husband barely flinched. He just stared at me, calm, unreadable, until they pulled him away. When it was over, I sat alone at the table, my untouched glass of water trembling under my fingertips. The noise around me faded, replaced by a strange stillness. I had wanted this for so long. Justice, closure. But it didn't feel like triumph. It felt like the end of something that had already died long ago. For the first time in months, I breathed without fear. But freedom, I realized, wasn't the absence of pain. It was learning to live with it and still move forward. Justice came slowly, but it came. The investigation stretched for months, uncovering every layer of the operation my ex-husband had built. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial trails, falsified records, and testimony from people who had once worked under him. Emily and he were both sentenced to life without parole. The rest of the network collapsed soon after. When the judge read the verdict, I didn't feel triumph, I felt release. The kind that comes when a storm finally moves on, leaving silence in its wake. But silence can be hard to live with. When the adrenaline faded, I was left with the wreckage of what they'd taken. Trust, safety, innocence. I had spent so long surviving that I didn't know how to simply live anymore. That was when therapy became not just an option, but a necessity. Sitting in that small, sunlit room week after week, I learned to breathe again, to let the words come without shame or fear. Healing wasn't a straight line. Some mornings I woke with peace, others with memories that made my hands tremble. But I kept showing up. I found support in small things, walking along the beach near my home, journaling late at night, reconnecting with friends I had shut out during the chaos. Slowly, the noise inside me softened. Forgiveness was the hardest lesson. Not for them. They didn't deserve it. But for myself. For the years I ignored red flags, for trusting too easily, for carrying guilt that wasn't mine. One day, I realized forgiveness didn't mean excusing the pain. It meant freeing myself from it. It meant choosing to stop letting their darkness define my days. I began volunteering with organizations that help survivors of manipulation and abuse. It gave meaning to everything I'd endured. Turning pain into purpose became my quiet rebellion against everything they'd tried to destroy. I no longer wanted revenge. I wanted peace. Looking back now, I see a version of myself I once thought was gone forever. Strong, grounded, and whole. I don't see a victim anymore. I see a woman who lived through betrayal and found herself on the other side, standing taller because of it. If you're listening to this and carrying your own kind of pain, betrayal, loss, fear, know this survival isn't just about staying alive. It's about learning to live again without the weight of what broke you. Healing takes time, but it is possible. Thank you for being here with me, for walking through this story. Have you ever faced something that forced you to rebuild from the ground up? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone,